The wind howled through the narrow lanes of Kendal, a sleepy town nestled in the Lake District, England.
Rain lashed against the windows of Westmoreland General Hospital, blurring the view of the hills outside.
The storm had rolled in quickly that night, a cold front sweeping in from the Irish Sea, turning the roads slick and the skies black. Inside the maternity ward, Emma Langley lay on the delivery bed, her hands clenched around the sides of the mattress, her knuckles white. Sweat poured down her forehead, soaking her auburn hair, now plastered to her pale skin. Her breaths came in jagged bursts, each contraction hitting harder than the last. A nurse named Claire dabbed her forehead gently, whispering encouragement, but Emma could barely hear her. Her mind was elsewhere. For weeks now, strange dreams had haunted her. Dreams of a baby whose face she could never quite see, wrapped in shadow and silence. Of whispering trees and moonlight dancing on fur. She dismissed them as the usual anxieties of a first-time mother. But something about tonight, the storm, the cold, the way the lights flickered in the hallway, felt too much like an omen. "Is the baby okay?" Emma gasped, trying to lift her head as another wave of pain hit. Daniel, her husband, stood at her side. His hand gripped hers, trembling. He looked more terrified than she felt. His dark eyes were wide, jaw clenched, lips tight. He didn't speak. Couldn't. "The baby's heart rate is steady," said the obstetrician, Dr. Rowland, scanning the monitor. But his brow was furrowed. "We're close."
The pain crescendo.
Emma screamed, her voice echoing down the sterile corridor. She bore down with everything she had, the world around her narrowing to a pinpoint of pressure and pain.
And then, the cry.
A single, sharp wail pierced the room, followed by silence. No one moved. No one spoke. Emma tried to sit up, gasping. Why isn't anyone saying anything? Daniel released her hand. He had gone pale, his mouth slightly open, staring at the newborn cradled in the nurse's arms. "Let me see him," Emma said, her voice rising. But the nurse hesitated.
For un moment, juste un moment, Emma caught sight of her son.
And what she saw was not what she had imagined. He was crying like any other newborn, but his body, his entire body, was covered in a thick coat of black hair.
Not soft, newborn fuzz.
Real hair. Dense, smooth, and unnaturally dark. Even his face, his tiny eyelids, his ears, every inch of him was hidden beneath the strange, glistening layer. Emma froze.
The room tilted.
The nurse turned away, hurriedly wrapping the baby in a thick towel, obscuring him from view.
Un métal clan clattered to the floor. Another nurse cursed under her breath. What is happening?
Emma whispered, her throat dry. Dr. Rowland cleared his throat, gesturing toward the NICU team. "The baby seems stable.
Good vital.
But there's an anomaly. We need to run a few tests." "No," Emma said, struggling to rise. "Give him to me."
That is my baby.
Daniel stepped forward and gently placed a hand on her shoulder.
Emma, please.
"Just let them check."
Something is not right.
Emma stared at him. "You've seen him.
Haven't you?
What's wrong with him?" He didn't answer.
The doors swung open.
A pediatric nurse, flanked by 2 NICU assistants, took the baby and disappeared down the hallway. Emma screamed, reaching out, but her arms were too weak. The pain, the exhaustion, and now this silence, crushed her like a weight. Hours passed. She was moved to a recovery room under soft, artificial lights. Outside, the rain continued, ticking gently against the windows like the tapping of cold fingers. Daniel sat by the wall, his face buried in his hands. He hadn't said a word since. Emma stared at the ceiling, her body numb, her mind racing. What did I see?
Not a monster. Not a créature. A baby.
A child. Mine. She closed her eyes, and his tiny face, fur-covered, but undeniably human, burned behind her eyelids.
A soft knock came at the door.
A woman entered. She was in her early 40s, with sharp eyes and a calm, practiced gait. Her ID badge read, Dr. Grace Holloway, geneticist. "Mrs. Langley," she said gently, taking a seat. "I'm here to help you understand what's going on." Emma looked up sharply.
"Where is my son?"
"He's being kept in neonatal care," Grace replied. "He's healthy. Strong. No respiratory issues. No infections. But we need to discuss certain traits.
You mean the hair?
Yes, Grace said. We're conducting tests, but initial scans show no known genetic disorder.
Not hypertrichosis.
Not any form of congenital hyperplasia. His DNA doesn't match any case on record.
Emmaes engripped the blanquet.
So what are you saying? I'm saying we don't know, Grace admitted. He may be the first of his kind.
Emmaes briscoqued.
Her kind? The words echoed in her mind, bouncing between fear and awe. What does that mean? Is he dangerous? No, Grace said firmly. He's just different. And different doesn't mean wrong. Emma looked at her for a long moment. Then she whispered, I want to see him. Now. Grace hesitated. There are precautions.
I don't care. That is my son.
And I will hold him. Grace nodded slowly. Very well. But I must warn you. Others, press officials, have already started asking questions.
Emmaes' eyes flashed.
Let them ask. He's my child. And I won't let anyone take him away. Grace stood, her expression unreadable. Then you'd better prepare yourself, Mrs. Langley. Because this is just the beginning. Emma stood in the neonatal observation room, separated from her son by a pane of reinforced glass. The room was quiet, sterile, bathed in the soft glow of overhead lights. Machines hummed faintly as monitors blinked in rhythm with the child's breathing. Lucas lay swaddled in white, his tiny chest rising and falling. He was asleep, peaceful, unaware of the chaos his birth had triggered. Emma pressed her hand against the glass, her eyes never leaving him. His features were delicate, his lips, his nose, the shape of his chin, all perfect. And yet, that thick coat of dark hair remained, shrouding his body like armor. A nurse entered the room, glanced at the vitals, made a few notes on her tablet, and left without acknowledging Emma. They were avoiding her. No one had spoken directly to her since Dr. Holloway. Even Daniel had barely looked at her. The next morning, a hospital administrator asked her to sign a temporary custody release form, just a formality, they said, so we can conduct extended observation. Emma refused. By afternoon, the media had found them. It started with an online tabloid article, Mystery Baby in Cumbria, Doctors Baffled.
It spread like wildfire.
A photo taken from a hospital staff member's phone, blurry, but unmistakable, circulated across social media.
Headline screamed.
Fur-covered infant baffles experts. Mother refuses medical testing on hairy newborn.
Modern day werewolf.
Emma stared at the screen in disbelief, Daniel sitting beside her in silence. You told them? She asked quietly. Daniel didn't answer.
You leaked the story.
He shook his head. I didn't leak anything. But you said something.
Someone knew. Someone inside.
He stood, pacing.
People talk, Emma.
A baby like that, people talk. She rose, unsteady. He's not a baby like that. He's our son. Daniel turned to her, his face pale, drawn. I know he's ours. But can you honestly tell me you're not afraid? That you're not wondering what the hell is going on?
Emmaes en trembled.
I don't care what he looks like. He's healthy. He's alive. And he's mine. A silence settled between them, heavy and suffocating. Later that night, Dr. Holloway returned. She looked tired, her shoulders weighed down with more than just fatigue. There's something you need to understand, she said, closing the door behind her.
Emma leaned forward.
What?
The attention.
The press. The speculation, it's just the beginning. I don't care what people say, Emma replied. I only care about Lucas. Grace nodded. That's good. You'll need to hold on to that. Because there are others who will care. Who already do. Emma frowned. Others. There are organizations, research firms, government agencies, who monitor anomalies. Especially those that defy established genetic patterns. Emma stiffened. He's not a threat. I know that. But to them, that won't matter. What they see is data. Potential. Risk. Emma's voice was low. Are you telling me they'll try to take him? Grace hesitated. Not overtly. Not yet. But they may pressure you. Offer assistance. Funding. Support. And in return, they'll ask for samples. Tests.
Limited access.
It always starts small. Emma looked out the window. Rain tapped gently against the glass, the storm having given way to a grey drizzle. I won't give him up, she said finally. To anyone. Grace nodded. Then you should leave. Before it escalates. That night, Emma packed a small bag. Jack, her cousin, arrived in a beat-up Land Rover just past midnight. He was older than her by 5 years, broad-shouldered, with a quiet demeanor and a reputation for fixing things that couldn't be fixed. He didn't ask questions. He just said, let's get you out of here. Daniel wasn't there when they left. Emma held Lucas close, wrapped in a soft blanket, his face nestled against her chest. He didn't cry. He never cried. He just stared, those wide golden-brown eyes too focused, too knowing. They drove north, avoiding the motorways, weaving through back roads and empty lanes. The farther they got from Kendall, the more Emma could breathe. After 4 hours, they reached a secluded cottage Jack owned near Ennerdale Water, on the edge of a thick pine forest. The property had no neighbors, no mobile signal, and only one road in or out. It was cold, damp, and isolated. It was perfect. Jack helped them settle in, lit a fire, and stocked the small kitchen with tins and dried goods. This'll buy you time, he said. Emma nodded, cradling Lucas as he slept in her arms. The smell of pine smoke filled the air, mingling with the scent of old wood and damp stone. She hadn't felt safe in days, but here in the quiet, she let herself breathe. For the first time, she watched her son sleep. Studied him. The way his small hands curled into fists. The soft rise and fall of his chest. The fine, dark hair that shimmered in the firelight. He was beautiful. Different. But beautiful. A few days passed. The world outside continued to speculate. News outlets camped outside Westmoreland Hospital. Emma's name began trending. The press called her everything from the wolf mother to dangerous and delusional. She stayed off the internet. Jack reinforced the doors, covered the windows, and taught her how to use the generator when the power lines failed. One evening, as Emma changed Lucas's nappy, she noticed something strange. His skin, where it had previously been smooth beneath the hair, had developed a texture.
Almost like Finskal.
When she ran warm water over it, it shimmered faintly, hardening slightly under pressure. When she wiped it gently, it softened again. She called Jack. He examined it silently, then looked at her. That's not normal. Emma swallowed. No. It isn't. Lucas giggled.
For un moment, Emma looked too.
Whatever he was, whatever he would become, he was still her child.
Still a baby.
But somewhere deep in her gut she knew. This was only the beginning. The days melted into each other in the forest.
The air was cold, the wind sharp, and the silence deep. No sirens, no television, no calls.
Only the whisper of pine trees, the crackle of the fireplace, and Lucas's soft cooing. Jack had made the cottage livable. He chopped wood daily, fixed the leaky roof, and set traps for small animals. Emma took care of Lucas, feeding him, bathing him, learning his patterns.
Every morning she woke before dawn, afraid.
And every night she went to sleep, more certain than ever, no one would love him like she did. He was changing. It wasn't just the hair anymore. His eyes, a rich honey brown, seemed to track things no baby should. The smallest rustle, the subtlest shift of light, he noticed it. His reflexes were unnaturally fast. Once when a candle tipped over near him, Emma watched, frozen, as his small hand reached up and batted it away before the wax could spill. There were no burns. His skin had flashed silver for an instant, like something beneath the surface had hardened, absorbed the heat, and vanished. Emma didn't tell Jack. Not yet. She kept a notebook instead, writing down every detail, the way Lucas's temperature remained unusually stable, how he never fell sick, how he seemed to instinctively sense her emotions. When she was calm, he was calm. When she cried, he whimpered. When she smiled, he laughed. She wrote one sentence over and over again in the margins. He's not dangerous. He's different. That's not a crime. One morning, she stepped outside to hang clothes on the line. The frost had begun to retreat under a weak sun. Birds called distantly, and for the first time in weeks, the forest felt alive. Then she saw it. A symbol, drawn in white chalk, etched on the bark of the old elm near the gate. 3 vertical lines, connected at the base by a single horizontal slash.
Below it, a word.
Cleanse. Her heart stopped. She backed away slowly, eyes scanning the trees. There was no sound. No movement. She called for Jack. He came out, rifle in hand, took one look at the mark, and his jaw clenched. "Do you know what this is?" she asked. He nodded. "Yeah. It's been popping up in towns across the north. Chalk marks on refugee homes, ethnic centers.
Anti-immigrant graffiti."
But why here? Jack was silent for a long moment. Then he muttered, "Because someone knows." They scrubbed the tree clean, but the mark remained faintly visible beneath the grain. That night, Jack installed a second lock on the front door. 2 days later, they found a dead fox nailed to the gatepost. Its fur was burned in patches. Its eyes had been gouged out. Another chalk mark stained its belly. Emma didn't scream. She simply picked up Lucas, held him tight, and said nothing. She knew this was a message. Someone had found them. And someone wanted them gone. Jack contacted a friend, a former police officer who now worked in private security. He warned them quietly. "There's a group," the man said over a secured call. "Not official. Not on any government list. But real. They call themselves the Albion Purists. Not many members. But violent. They believe in genetic purity, English bloodlines, ancestral integrity. Old-school nationalist rhetoric mixed with eugenics and survivalist philosophy." Emma felt cold. "What do they want?" she asked. "To erase what doesn't fit," the voice answered. "They think your child's a mistake. A mutation. And they don't believe in tolerance."
Jack up.
That night, he started sleeping on the couch with his shotgun across his lap. Emma knew they couldn't stay much longer. But leaving meant exposure. Returning to the world meant flashing lights, microphones, headlines. It meant doctors, laws, and men in suits pretending to offer help while quietly preparing cages. So she waited. She watched.
She protected.
And Lucas thrived. He crawled early. Sat upright without support before his first month. He barely cried, except when Emma was out of sight. He responded to music, tracked shadows, and once, when a pine branch snapped under the weight of snow, he turned toward the sound before Jack or Emma even heard it. Then one evening, it happened. They were finishing dinner when the windows rattled. It wasn't wind. It was impact. Jack was up instantly. He grabbed the shotgun, motioned for Emma to stay back. She clutched Lucas to her chest and moved behind the kitchen wall. Then came the second bang, louder, sharper. Followed by the unmistakable hiss of glass shattering. The front window exploded inward. A bottle rolled across the wooden floor, flames licking its sides. Jack swore, stomped it out with a blanket, and grabbed the fire extinguisher. The smoke curled toward the ceiling.
Emma coughed, shielding Lucas' face.
Her heart pounded. When the fire was out, Jack peered outside.
No movement.
No vehicles.
Just trees and darkness.
But another mark had been painted on the stone wall beside the window, this time in red. It wasn't chalk. It was blood. Emma didn't sleep that night. She sat in the armchair beside Lucas's cot, holding his tiny hand in hers, listening for footsteps. But there was only the wind.
At dawn, she stood before the broken window, staring out into the forest.
She could no longer pretend this was a refuge. It was a trap. And the walls were closing in. The morning after the attack, Jack spent hours inspecting the perimeter. He found footprints, several pairs, deep and deliberate, circling the cottage.
No licence plate, no tire tracks, no signe traçable.
Whoever they were, they knew how to move without leaving evidence. Emma remained inside, cleaning the broken glass from the floor, her hands shaking. Lucas, sensing her tension, whimpered quietly in his crib. She knelt beside him, placed a hand on his tiny chest. "We're okay," she whispered. "We're okay." She wasn't sure if she believed it. Jack returned just after midday, carrying a new sheet of plywood to board up the broken window. He looked tired, more pale than usual. "We need to decide," he said. "Stay and fortify, or disappear." Emma didn't answer. She watched Lucas reach for the sunlight pooling through the cracked glass, his small fingers twitching in wonder. That was when the knock came.
Trisoft rap on the wooden door. Then silence.
Emma froze. Jack moved to the door, peering through the side panel. His shoulders stiffened. "It's Daniel."
Emma blinked.
"What?" "He's alone." She moved beside Jack, heart racing. Through the narrow glass slit, she saw him, Daniel, standing in the cold with a duffel bag over his shoulder. His face was unshaven, eyes sunken, coat damp with travel. Jack opened the door only halfway. "You've got 30 seconds to explain why you're here." Daniel looked past him, eyes searching. "I came for my family." Jack's voice sharpened. "You gave that up when you signed those forms."
Daniel stepped forward.
"I didn't sign anything. I never agreed to testing. I swear." Emma stood behind Jack, arms folded, her face unreadable. "Why now, Daniel?"
After everything?
"After you disappeared the night we left the hospital." He hesitated, glancing at the ground. "I made mistakes. I was scared." "We were all scared," she said coldly. "But I didn't run." "I've been followed too," he said. "You think they've only been after you? They came to my work. My flat. I had people watching me, asking questions I couldn't answer." Jack narrowed his eyes. "Then why bring them here?" Daniel looked at him, then at Emma. "Because I don't know who else to trust." Emma studied his face. It was the same face she had married, gentle but uncertain. There had always been something fragile about Daniel, something unrooted. Against her better judgment, she let him in. He sat by the fire, warming his hands. Lucas peeked at him from the corner of the room, clutching a soft toy. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "He's beautiful," he whispered. Emma didn't speak. For the next hour, Daniel talked, about how his life had unraveled, how reporters had camped outside his building, how friends stopped answering his calls. He seemed remorseful, exhausted. And yet, something was off. That night, while Daniel slept on the sofa, Emma crept into the guest room. Jack was at the desk, sorting supplies. "I don't trust him," she said quietly. Jack nodded. "Neither do I. He's lying. I can feel it." Jack reached into the drawer and pulled out a folder. "I checked his bag while he was showering." Emma opened the folder and froze. Inside were documents, unsigned contracts, research profiles, photographs of Lucas taken in the hospital, medical diagrams. A letter from Novagen Biotech, a private research firm based in London, offering Daniel £200,000 in exchange for legal guardianship and cooperation. There was more. A digital tablet with encrypted messages. One file stood out.
Subject. Project Échelon. Spécimen L013. Lucas. Emmaes Briscocht.
He was going to hand him over. Jack nodded. Or still plans to. She clutched the folder to her chest and left the room.
Daniel was sitting by the fire again, staring into the flame.
Emma dropped the file onto the coffee table. He looked up, startled.
"What is this?"
"You tell me," she said. His mouth opened, closed. "Emma, I can explain." "Then do it," she snapped. "I didn't go through with it," he said quickly. "They contacted me. I said I'd think about it. That's all. You were going to sell your own son." "I was desperate," he whispered. "They said they could protect us. That they had facilities, security, medical care." "For who?" she asked. "For Lucas? Or for you?"
Daniel stood.
"I was trying to do the right thing." "You don't even know what that is," she said. He took a step toward her. Jack appeared in the hallway, silent, holding the shotgun, not raised but visible. Daniel stopped. "I want you out," Emma said. "Emma. Now." Daniel looked at her, then at Lucas, who had crawled out from behind the armchair, blinking sleepily at the tension in the room. "I'm still his father." "No," she said quietly.
"You're not."
He left with the duffel bag, head down, shoulders hunched against the wind. Emma didn't watch him go. Later, she sat beside Lucas as he played with wooden blocks, stacking them with surprising precision. She picked him up, holding him close. "You deserve better," she whispered. "You deserve someone who won't run. Someone who doesn't see a price tag when they look at you." Lucas reached up and touched her cheek, his small hand warm. In the corner of the room, the tablet Daniel had left behind buzzed.
Encrypted message blinked on the screen.
"Has the asset been secured?" Emma stared at it for a long time before powering it off. The next morning, Jack reinforced the doors again. Emma began packing a second bag. They would have to move. Again. But now, she understood. It wasn't just about hiding anymore. It was about defending. The first snow arrived 2 nights later, blanketing the pines in silence. The forest turned white, and the world around the cottage seemed to pause. But Emma felt no peace. Since Daniel's departure, the unease had grown.
Lucas had grown restless.
He cried more often, not out of hunger or discomfort, but something else, something deeper, a kind of agitation. He refused to sleep alone. Every time Emma laid him down, his eyes darted to the window, to the corners of the ceiling, to shadows only he seemed to notice. Jack tripled the patrols. He set up crude traps in the underbrush, motion sensors linked to old batteries and LED strips. Emma helped where she could, her senses now honed for every snap of twigs, every rustle in the snow. Then one morning, they found the symbol again. This time, it wasn't chalk. It was carved. A deep gash in the trunk of the largest pine by the gate. The same 3 lines, connected by the slash. Below it, in etched block letters, "Leave or burn." Emma stared at the mark, her hands trembling. Jack took a photo, then destroyed the bark with an axe. The message stayed in their minds long after it had vanished from the tree. That night, they kept Lucas in their room. The windows were blocked.
The lights off.
Jack stayed awake with the shotgun across his knees. At 2 in the morning, the sensors outside blinked red. Emma sat bolt upright. Jack moved to the door. He peered through the peephole. Then he whispered, "Someone's out there." Emma grabbed Lucas and slipped into the hallway. Outside, the forest glowed faintly in the moonlight. Shadows moved between trees, 3 figures, maybe 4, dressed in dark clothing, faces covered. Jack stepped out silently, circling the side of the cottage, rifle raised. And then, the first bottle flew. It hit the front wall and burst into flame. A second followed, shattering against the snow-dusted porch.
Fire licked up the stone, hissing in the cold. Emma screamed. Jack fired a warning shot into the air.
The attackers scattered, their footsteps crunching against the snow as they disappeared into the trees. The fire didn't spread. Jack doused it quickly. But the damage was done. They had come to burn them out. Inside, Emma clutched Lucas against her chest. His skin was warm, hot, even. Too hot. She looked down. His eyes were glowing. Not brightly, not like a light bulb, but a faint golden sheen pulsed beneath the surface, like embers behind glass. His small hands gripped her tightly, his breath shallow. "Jack," she called.
Something's wrong.
Jack entered, mud on his boots, soot on his coat. He froze when he saw Lucas.
The baby's skin shimmered, juste for un instant, like metal catching the sun.
Then it dulled again. "He's burning up," Emma said. Jack approached cautiously. "Is he in pain?" "No," Emma said. I think he's protecting himself." She dipped a cloth in cold water and pressed it to Lucas's forehead. His temperature dropped almost instantly. The glow faded. His breathing slowed.
Jack exhaled.
"Jesus." Emma looked up at him. "He's evolving." Jack didn't reply. He didn't need to. They both knew what it meant. Lucas was no longer just different. He was something new. The next day, Jack made a decision. "We have to go." Emma didn't argue. "Where?"
In Someon. À Franfrom University.
"He teaches biology at Durham. Smart, discreet. He might know someone who can help, off the grid." Emma packed what she could. Diapers.
Formula. The document from Daniel Establet.
A burner phone.
Lucas' small red blanket.
They left at dusk, driving north in the Land Rover, sticking to back roads. They drove through the night, stopping only once for fuel at an unmanned station. Lucas slept most of the way, his skin back to its usual pale tone, his breathing soft. They arrived at the edge of Durham just before dawn. Jack's friend, Dr. Marcus Wells, lived in a converted farmhouse near the river. He welcomed them with cautious warmth. A tall man in his 50s with thick glasses and calloused hands, Marcus didn't ask questions. He simply led them inside, offered tea, and pointed to a spare room. "I won't ask why you're here," he said to Jack. "But I saw the news."
He saw the child.
"And I can guess." Emma didn't speak. Lucas stirred in her arms, blinked at the stranger, then looked away. That night, Marcus examined Lucas under dim light. He ran no invasive tests, took no samples, only observed. "He's not just a genetic outlier," he said finally. "His biology is adaptive. Rapid response mechanisms. Environmental shielding. I've never seen anything like it." "Is he dangerous?" Emma asked. "No," Marcus said. "Not unless someone makes him that way." Emma nodded. The following morning, Marcus received a call. He stepped outside to take it, but Jack followed him. He returned looking grim. "They know we're here," Jack said.
Nos agents.
"They've been tracking Daniel's movements. They think you're headed north."
Emma est briscoqued.
"What do we do?" "We move again," Jack said. "But this time, not just to hide." Emma looked down at Lucas, now asleep on the couch, one tiny hand curled into a fist. "We need to fight," she whispered. Jack nodded. They couldn't run forever. The sun was just beginning to rise over Durham when Emma stood by the window of Marcus's farmhouse, staring out at the frost-covered fields. The landscape stretched far and open, but she no longer saw it as freedom. It was exposure. Vulnerability. Jack entered with 2 steaming mugs and placed one gently on the windowsill beside her. "He's still sleeping," he said. Emma nodded.
He slept better last night.
"He's sensing the shift," Jack said.
Just like we are.
Emma turned to him.
We can't keep moving like this.
"It's breaking him." Jack didn't argue. They had already run too far, for too long. Every safe house became another memory of fear. Every new town was a gamble. Emma lifted the mug to her lips but didn't drink. "We need answers. Real ones." "There's only one person I know who might give them to us," Jack replied.
Grace Holloway.
Emma had thought about her every day since the hospital. The geneticist had been the only one who'd spoken plainly. The only one who hadn't recoiled from Lucas. "She warned us," Emma said. "She might not welcome us back." "She might," Jack said. "Or at least she'll understand." That afternoon, Marcus contacted Grace through a private academic network. She responded within hours, requesting a secure meeting in person. Emma and Jack drove to Newcastle under strict conditions.
No mobile phone.
No GPS.
No public transport.
They met Grace in the back room of a small university laboratory, behind closed doors and beneath silent cameras. Grace looked thinner than Emma remembered. Her dark eyes held the same sharpness, but there was something heavier in them now, fatigue maybe. Or resignation. "You brought him," she said softly, looking at Lucas, who sat on Emma's lap, silent and alert. Emma nodded. Grace pulled a chair and sat opposite them. "No media," Emma said immediately. "No notes. No samples. This is a conversation, not an interview." "I understand," Grace replied. "And I agree." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Grace leaned forward. "I ran your files again. From the hospital. After you disappeared, I continued researching the anomaly. Cross-referenced your blood work, Emma."
N. Danieles. Emma Tanced.
"What did you find?" "Not a disease.
Not a mutation.
But something deliberate." She placed a sealed envelope on the table. Inside were 2 documents, lab reports, highlighted gene maps, annotations scribbled in pencil. "What am I looking at?" Jack asked.
Hidden vector, Grace said. A synthetic gene sequence embedded in Danieles' DNA.
"Something engineered. And not recently." Emma looked up, stunned. "You mean, he was altered?" Yes, Grace said. He was part of a medical trial in his 20s. A gene therapy initiative funded by Novagen. Back then it was advertised as immune enhancement, designed for patients with autoimmune disorders. But the vector wasn't just curative. It was adaptive. You're saying Lucas inherited it, Jack said. Not just inherited it, Grace replied. He triggered it. Combined with a rare dormant gene in Emma's DNA, something new was born. Not disease.
Not deformity.
A functional adaptation. Emma felt her throat tighten. You said it's synthetic. Yes. Which means someone owns the original code. Emma stared at her.
Novagen.
Grace nodded. They've been watching ever since the birth. Quietly. Carefully.
Waiting for a mistake.
Daniel may have told them more than he realized.
Emma leaned back, holding Luca tighter.
The child looked up at her, calm and still. So what happens now? Jack asked. You have a few options, Grace said. Run again. But they'll find you eventually. Or.
You make dispublic.
File a legal petition. Establish legal personhood for Lucas under international bioethics law.
It's dangereux.
But it's the only way to challenge their claim.
Emma narrowed her eyes.
We would have to admit everything. Yes, Grace said.
Every detail.
In front of the court. The media. The public. They'll destroy him, Emma said. Rip him apart in headlines. Or, Grace replied, you make the world look at him and realize he's just a child. A child with rights. Like any other. Jack looked at Emma. It's your call. Emma stared down at Lucas, who had curled into her side. His breathing was soft. Steady. I won't let them own him, she whispered. I won't let them define him. Grace reached into her coat and pulled out a second envelope. This is a contact, she said.
A sollicitor named Eleanor Wakefield.
She specializes in bioethics litigation. She's discreet. Brave. You'll need her. Emma took the envelope. Thank you, she said. I wish I could do more, Grace said. But my name already appears in their files. If I push further, I become a liability. And that means they'll silence me. Emma nodded. You've already risked enough. They left the lab just after sunset. The air was colder now, the wind sharper. Emma clutched Lucas beneath her coat as they walked to the car. Are you sure? Jack asked once they were on the road. Emma didn't answer right away. Then she said, I want him to grow up knowing I stood up for him. Even when the world told me not to. Jack nodded, his eyes on the road. As they drove back into the dark, the headlights slicing through fog, Emma held the envelope close. She had made her choice. She would take them to court. And this time, she would not run. The courtroom was nothing like Emma had imagined. It wasn't grand or dramatic, but plain, clinical, even. Pale wood, muted lighting, no cameras allowed. The only thing louder than the ticking of the wall clock was the silence that stretched between breaths. Emma sat at the front bench, Lucas cradled in her arms. He was nearly 1 year old now. Stronger. Sharper. His eyes scanned the room with a quiet intelligence, one small hand gripping the sleeve of her coat. On her left sat Eleanor Wakefield, the solicitor Grace had recommended, a sharp-featured woman in her 40s with a calm presence and a voice that cut like glass. On Emma's right, Jack sat with folded arms, eyes trained on the rows of opposing counsel. Across the aisle sat the representatives of Novagen Biotech, 4 men in dark suits, their eyes cold, their expressions unreadable. One of them, a man named Thomas Rayner, was the lead legal strategist. He had a smooth voice, practiced charm, and no hesitation when it came to referring to Lucas not as a child, but as the subject. The judge, an older woman named Justice Harrow, entered the room and called for order. This court is now in session for the hearing of Langley v. Novagen Biotech, regarding claims of unlawful genetic surveillance, bioethical violation, and attempted custodial interference. We will also consider the motion filed by the petitioner for formal protection of minor status for the child referred to as Lucas Langley. The proceedings began with Eleanor establishing context, Emma's background, the circumstances of Lucas's birth, and the increasingly aggressive tactics employed by Novagen to obtain custody of the child. She presented evidence from the files Daniel had left behind, encrypted communications requesting Lucas be secured for developmental tracking, as well as Marcus's observational reports. Thomas Rayner responded coolly, standing to deliver his opening. "We acknowledge the child's unique biology," he said, "and we do not contest his parentage. However, the presence of synthetic sequences in his genome, originating from proprietary gene therapy technology, entitles Novagen to limited scientific custody, per the existing legal structure surrounding modified human tissue." Eleanor stood. "Modified tissue is not a living child. Your argument equates patent law with parenthood." Rayner smiled politely. "We're simply stating that advancements in biology have outpaced our legal vocabulary. If we are to be responsible stewards of scientific innovation, we must accept certain realities." "And what reality is that?" Eleanor asked. "That the boy may not be entirely human." The room fell silent. Emma felt her heart hammer in her chest. She stood before the judge, clutching Lucas tighter. "With all due respect," she said, her voice trembling but clear, "my son is not a concept. He's not a scientific curiosity. He's a child."
Hello Gwen i singulier. Écrit when he leaves the room.
"He's ticklish.
Et à tes brocolis.
And he says mum before anything else. What part of that makes him less human?" Justice Harrow nodded slightly, scribbling notes. "Mrs. Langley, you'll have your full statement shortly. Please be seated." Over the next 2 hours, the hearing unfolded with escalating intensity. Expert witnesses were brought forward, one from Novagen, asserting the potential instability of Lucas's genome, warning of future anomalies. Another, a child psychologist who had met Lucas through Eleanor's network, testified that the boy exhibited no signs of psychological distress or abnormal aggression. "He is developmentally advanced, yes," she said. "But emotionally, he is grounded. He shows a secure attachment to his mother. He understands comfort, fear, affection, everything any child his age would. If anything, he is more attuned than most." Midway through the session, the courtroom doors opened. Emma turned. It was Lillian.
Danielès Moder.
She walked slowly, her posture stiff, her hair tightly pinned. No one had expected her to come. She had refused Emma's calls for months, retreating after the media firestorm. But now, she approached the judge's bench and requested to testify. Justice Harrow granted her 3 minutes. Lillian stood at the podium, hands clasped. "My son Daniel made choices I do not defend," she began. "And I made mistakes too. When Lucas was born, I was ashamed. I thought he was unnatural. That perhaps Emma had done something wrong. But I was wrong." She looked at Emma. "I saw him again last week. He smiled at me, reached for my necklace. And when I held him, I didn't see a threat. I saw my grandson. A child. And no law, no laboratory, no corporation should ever have the right to take him from his mother." She stepped away in silence. Emma reached for her hand as she passed. For the first time in a year, Lillian didn't pull away. Justice Harrow called a recess. In the hallway outside, Emma sat on a bench, Lucas asleep on her chest. Eleanor leaned beside her. "We did well," she said. "But it's not over. They're going to appeal, aren't they?"
Without ado.
"Even if we win?" "Especially if we win." Jack returned from a phone call, his face grim.
The media is cocked-wind.
"It's spreading. They've started calling Lucas Case 0. Emma closed her eyes. "They'll never see him as a child, will they?" she whispered.
Eleanor hésita-t-elle.
"Not all of them. But some will."
Enough, Meb.
When court resumed, Justice Harrow delivered a temporary ruling. Custodial rights remain with the biological mother, Emma Langley. Scientific access to the child is hereby restricted under the Bioethics and Emerging Persons Act. Any future claims must proceed through the Family and Child Welfare Division, and with express consent of the mother.
The gavel fell.
Emma exhaled, not in triumph, but in release. They had won. For now. As they exited the building, reporters surged toward them, shouting questions. Flashes exploded. A microphone struck Jack's shoulder. Eleanor guided them through the crowd. Lillian stood behind them, shielding Lucas from the cameras. "Go," she whispered. "Get out while you still can." They reached the car. Emma climbed in with Lucas and shut the door, the noise muffled instantly. She looked down at her son, who had slept through it all. "You're safe," she murmured. "They saw you. And they didn't look away." But in her heart, she knew the battle was far from over. Out there, behind the headlines and legal language, were men who still wanted to claim him. But now, they'd have to go through her.
Par 8, The World Répond, National Jugement.
The first headline hit the internet within hours of the court ruling. Mother wins rights over genetically modified child. Then came the others. Baby or biotech? The boy at the center of Britain's bioethics debate.
Lucas Langlais, Miracle of Science hors threat to humanity.
By nightfall, Lucas's face, blurred in some images, fully exposed in others, was on every major news network. Talk shows debated his existence. Scientists speculated. Conspiracy theorists screamed. Social media exploded with hashtags.
Hashtag Save Lucas. Hashtag Protect the Child. Hashtag K0. Hashtag Synthétique Son.
Emma watched in silence as the screen flickered in Marcus's living room. The farmhouse had become a temporary base again, but this time, it wasn't remote enough. Not from this. They were no longer fugitives. They were a national controversy. She turned the television off. In the kitchen, Jack was reading emails, his face tight. "We've received 50 interview requests," he said. 3 book offers.
1 film pitch. Emma stared. Film.
Apparently one of the streaming services wants to document the ethical journey of modern parenthood. Emma stood. They want to turn him into content. "He already is," Jack said. "Whether we let them or not." That night, a brick was thrown through the window. It hit the dining table, shattering a bowl of fruit and scattering shards across the floor. Attached was a note. "You're not a mother.
You're un accomplice."
The police arrived 20 minutes later. They took photos, asked questions, and left without reassurance. The officer in charge muttered something about heightened public tensions and stretched resources. Lucas didn't cry. He sat beside Emma on the couch, quiet, watching. The next morning, the press had found the farmhouse. Jack's Land Rover was surrounded by camera crews. Helicopters buzzed overhead. Protesters gathered at the end of the road, some with signs that read "Let him live" and "Love is not DNA," others with banners that screamed "Science cannot replace God," and "Human rights are for humans." Emma stayed inside with Lucas, curtains drawn. She could hear them chanting. 2 different rhythms.
2 différents worlds.
And Lucas caught in between. By evening, a televised debate aired across the nation. It featured 4 panelists, a geneticist, a child psychologist, a conservative member of parliament, and a bishop. The moderator tried to maintain control, but the discussion spiraled into accusation and fear. "Children like this, if we can call them that, represent a dangerous precedent," said the MP.
What is next?
Designer babies with military-grade enhancements?
Superhuman intelligence? Wendo 8C9.
"He's not a blueprint, he's a boy," the psychologist countered. "And he deserves compassion." The bishop folded his hands.
Compassion, yes.
But also caution. "We are trespassing in divine territory. This is not evolution. It is arrogance." The geneticist remained calm. "Whether you like it or not, Lucas is already here. The question is not should he exist, he does. The question is, will we be human enough to accept him?" Emma turned off the television again. She couldn't sleep that night. Neither could Jack. "We need to leave the country," he said. "There are offers. Safe zones.
Canada.
Iceland. Even New Zealand.
We could vanish again."
Quietly. Emma looked at Lucas, who was curled on the floor beside the fire, sound asleep. "If we run now, we teach him that he's something to be hidden. That the world is something to fear." Jack ran a hand through his hair. "But what if it is?" She didn't answer. The next day, the Daily Observer released a poll. "Do you believe Lucas Langley should be raised in society or under government protection?" 61% chose the latter. Emma closed the paper and placed it on the table. That evening, Lucas pointed to the fire and said his first full sentence.
"It's too loud in the world."
Emma knelt beside him, stunned.
What do you mean, darling?
He looked up at her.
All the voices.
They don't stop. She swallowed. What do they say? Lucas tilted his head. They ask what I am. Emma hugged him tightly. You're mine, she said.
That is what you are.
But her heart ached. Because she knew he was hearing them. Not just literally. He was sensing the collective unrest, the judgment, the suspicion. He was absorbing it. The next morning, the government made a statement. A representative from the Ministry of Health and Biosecurity read a carefully worded declaration. In light of growing public concern regarding the health, safety, and long-term impact of biologically modified individuals, the Crown reserves the right to initiate emergency legislation regarding non-consensual genetic inheritance and its social implications. It wasn't a law, but it was a threat. Emma contacted Eleanor. They're preparing to take him, she said. Not legally, but through loopholes. Eleanor sighed. I've seen it before. They'll declare him a matter of national security. Can we stop them? Not if you're still on the run. I'm not, Emma said. We'll go public. Eleanor paused. Are you sure? I want the world to see him, to hear his voice. Not theories, not scans. Him. Jack agreed, reluctantly. So 3 days later, Emma and Lucas appeared on a live-streamed interview hosted by a respected journalist, someone who had covered human rights issues for decades, and who promised no tricks. The set was simple.
Emma sat on one side.
Lucas beside her, holding her hand. The host smiled.
Emma, you veux chose en autoide.
Why now? Because my son deserves to be seen as he is. Not as a case file. Not as a fear. As a person. Lucas looked at the camera. I like music, he said softly. And colors. I like yellow the most. The host leaned forward.
Lucas, do you know why people talk about you?
He nodded. Because I'm different. And how does that make you feel?
Lucas thought for a moment. Lonely.
Emma's throat tightened. But I don't want them to be scared, he added. I'm just small. The broadcast ended in silence. Millions watched. Some wept. Some raged. Some finally saw. The night after the broadcast, the farmhouse was quiet.
Emma lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind rattle the windows.
Lucas slept beside her, one hand curled around the edge of the blanket, his breathing soft and even. She replayed his words in her mind. I'm just small. Simple. Honest. And yet it had reached millions. The interview had gone viral within hours. View counts climbed into the tens of millions. Public opinion, for the first time, began to tilt. A new wave of support flooded in, letters, messages, offers of sanctuary. People around the world posted videos under the hashtag #ICLucas. And yet, amid the light, there was still the shadow. Threats continued. Protests intensified. One of the reporters who'd aired supportive coverage was assaulted outside her home. Politicians warned of manipulated sympathy and emotional blackmail.
Emma knew the tide could turn again.
Easily. Rapidly. That morning, she received a message from an encrypted email address. It was unsigned but contained only one sentence. You need to know what happened to L009. Attached was a single video file. She opened it, hands trembling. The footage was grainy, time-stamped 5 years earlier.
A sterile white room. Surveillance caméra angle. A crib in the corner.
Inside, a small child, no older than 4, curled into the bedding, covered in patches of coarse dark hair. A girl. The file had no sound. But Emma could see the girl breathing heavily, eyes darting around the room. She was scared. In the corner, a technician entered, carrying a tray of instruments.
The girl recoiled.
Tried to speak. The technician moved forward anyway.
The screen cut to static. Emma sat in silence.
Then she played it again.
Jacques came in midway through the third replay.
He stood behind her, his expression tightening with each second. Who is she? He asked.
Emma said nothing.
Her voice had caught in her throat. But the file name said enough.
Elle, 009.
Not L013. Not Lucas. There had been others. Emma forwarded the video to Grace Holloway with a single line. What do you know about this? The reply came 30 minutes later. Grace asked to meet. In person. Immediately. They drove to a small coastal village outside Sunderland, where Grace had arranged a private meeting room in an old marine research center. The walls were damp, the air faintly tinged with salt and rust. Grace sat at the far end of the table, her face grave. I knew this day would come, she said, but I didn't want it to. Emma placed her hands on the table. How many were there? 13 subjects identified in total, Grace said.
Only 2 born alive.
1 male. 1 female.
Emmaes Brisicht. The girl in the video.
Her name was Amara, Grace said quietly. She was born in Northern Ireland. Her mother was a domestic worker who never understood what had happened during her pregnancy. Amara was taken into custody hours after birth. The mother was told she had died from complications.
Emma stared.
And what happened to her? Grace looked down. She survived in containment for almost 5 years.
No shololing. No sunlight. Daily testing.
She developed signs of acute sensory distress. Eventually, she stopped speaking. Jack clenched his fists. You let this happen. I didn't know, Grace said, voice firm.
No tintil after.
I wasn't involved in the Irish project. That was under a different division. But once I found out, I tried to intervene. I filed reports.
Res d'alarme.
I was shut down.
And Amara? Emma whispered.
Grace hesitated. She died during an experimental stress trial. They were testing her reaction to high-frequency sound exposure. Her heart gave out. Emma covered her mouth, eyes wide with horror. She was 5, Grace said. 5 years old. And no one even held her when she died. Silence fell across the room. She was just like Lucas, Emma said, finally. Only she didn't have someone to fight for her. Grace nodded. That's why you need to go public with this. With her story. Emma looked at Jack, then back to Grace.
You want me to expose them?
Yes. They'll retaliate. They already are. Emma stood and paced the room, arms folded. If I do this, she said, I'm not just risking Lucas. I'm risking every child who might be born like him in the future. They'll shut down the research.
Déclarer it too dangereux.
Bury it. Or, Grace said, they'll be forced to regulate it. To protect it. To acknowledge that these children exist, and deserve rights from the very start. Emma turned to face her.
If he speak out, he can't protect him from the world anymore.
Grace stood, slowly. No. But maybe the world will start learning how to protect itself, by listening. Emma returned to the farmhouse in silence. She held Lucas that night longer than usual, watching his chest rise and fall, his eyelids flutter in sleep.
She imagined Amara. Alone in a white room.
Cold. Afraid. She couldn't change the past. But she could drag it into the light. The next morning, she sat at the kitchen table with her laptop and began to write. A statement. Not for court.
Not for news. For the people.
For every parent. For every child like Amara who never got the chance to be seen. She titled it simply. She was 5. And then she began. Before my son, there was a girl named Amara. The essay was published at dawn. Emma uploaded it to a personal blog account under her own name. No PR firm, no legal buffer, no anonymity. Just her voice. The title stood stark against the white background. She was 5. Within hours, it began to spread. The story of Amara, the lost girl, the firstborn, the child who never left her containment cell, ignited something raw and undeniable. News outlets picked it up. Activists called for inquiries.
Protesters demanded accountability.
Hashtags multiplied.
Hashtag justice for Amara. Hashtag never again. Hashtag children are not experiments.
But along with outrage came fear. Opposition groups twisted the narrative. Conspiracy theorists claimed the essay was fake, manufactured to distract from the threat Lucas represented. A far-right publication accused Emma of weaponizing motherhood to gain public sympathy. Novagen issued a brief statement denying all involvement with the Irish trial program. But the leak had already grown legs. 3 former researchers stepped forward anonymously, confirming the program existed. Internal documents, redacted but damning, circulated through watchdog groups.
One handwritten memo simply read.
Subject L009 shows increased auditory sensitivity. Initiate Phase 2 response. That same day, the Prime Minister was questioned in Parliament. Emma watched the session from the safety of Marcus's farmhouse, Lucas curled in her lap, fiddling with a spoon. On screen, members of Parliament shouted over one another. Demands for regulation. Calls for transparency.
And beneatitol, one question linger.
What kind of future are we building? That night, Eleanor called. They can't touch you now, she said. Public opinion has turned. The Home Office won't risk a scandal. Emma barely nodded. She should have felt relief. But she didn't. She felt the weight of it all, every child like Lucas who might come after. Every parent who might be too scared to fight. Every Amara the world had failed to see. Jack entered with a small suitcase. His expression was calm, but there was a tension in his jaw. I think it's time, he said. Emma looked up.
Time for what?
For you to choose. He placed a piece of paper on the table. It was an invitation. A private research initiative in Norway, fully independent, non-governmental, funded by ethical science cooperatives. They offered education, protection, medical support.
A place for children like Luca to grow without fear.
But they can't guarantee secrecy, Jack said. And they don't want to. They're building transparency, not walls.
Emma read it twice.
They want to study him? They want to learn from him. But on your terms. You'd be in control. She glanced down at Lucas. He was drawing again.
Circle, lines, star.
He had started using symbols lately, shapes no one had taught him. Sometimes, she thought they meant something. Other times, they felt like dreams turned into ink. If we go there, she said slowly, we stop running. Yes. And if we stay? Then we fight from here. But we'll always be one step behind. Emma stayed quiet. The next morning, they took Lucas to the lake. It was still cold in the hills, but the snow had melted, revealing soft earth and patches of green. The water stretched out smooth and silver under a pale sky. Lucas toddled to the edge, dipped his fingers in, then looked back and smiled. Emma knelt beside him. You know, she said softly, when you were born, the world didn't know what to do with you.
Luca blinked.
They still don't. And maybe they never will. But I do. She took his hand and kissed it. You're not here to fit their story.
You're here to write your own.
That night, she stood in front of the mirror and clipped her hair short.
A new beginning.
Not just for Lucas. For herself.
Jacques laudait the car. Marcus hugged her goodbye.
I'll follow the news, he said.
And if you ever need a place to disappear again.
She smiled.
You hope he never do. Eleanor called one last time, her voice steady.
You'll be safe in Oslo.
And visible.
Which, for people like you, is the real risk. Emma nodded. We're not hiding anymore.
They drove through the night.
At the airport, Emma held Lucas tight as they passed through security. A few travelers looked too long. Some whispered. One woman simply smiled.
The plane rose into the sky.
Above the clouds, with stars on the horizon, Emma closed her eyes and breathed.
Luca slept on her shoulder.
When they landed, the sun was rising again. In Oslo, they were met by a woman named Ingrid, one of the program's directors. She led them to a quiet facility outside the city, surrounded by pine forest and fields of snowdrop flowers just beginning to bloom. There were other families.
Other children.
Some with subtle traits. Others more visible.
One boy with translucent skin.
A girl with eyes that changed hue with her emotions. Lucas stepped forward, took a hesitant look around. Then he smiled. He wasn't alone. Emma stood behind him, heart full. The world had tried to own him, to name him, to fear him. But now he had something else. A future. Not free of struggle. Not safe from judgment. But his. And as he ran into the morning light, chasing a paper plane another child had tossed into the sky, Emma whispered to herself, "You were never the mistake.
You were the warning. And the promise."